The man returned earlier than expected from his trip. He was tired but happy to be back home. The long drive had made his eyes heavy, but the thought of his ranch, the place where he always felt peace, gave him comfort. He imagined sitting on the porch with a cup of coffee, listening to the quiet breeze across his land. But as he drove closer toward his ranch, something caught his attention. There were several cars parked along the dirt road. Cars he had never seen before. His brows furrowed. Because normally that road was empty. Only he and sometimes a delivery truck used it. His heart skipped a beat as he wondered who could be there. At first he thought maybe it was neighbors parking by mistake. Or maybe someone was lost and asking for directions. But when he rolled down his window, he could hear a strange noise. Voices echoing. People talking loudly. Then a sound that chilled him. The voice of someone shouting into a microphone or loudspeaker. It wasn't the kind of sound you expected on a quiet ranch road. It sounded official, organized, like some kind of event was happening right on his land. His heart sank deeper as he pushed the gas pedal and drove faster. When he reached the entrance to his ranch, the sight in front of him almost made him slam the brakes in disbelief. There was a crowd of strangers gathered inside his property. Men in suits, women holding clipboards, and even a man waving his hand in the air like he was bidding for something. His jaw tightened. His stomach turned as his eyes locked onto the figure standing proudly in front of everyone. It was HOA Karen, dressed in her neat blazer, holding papers in one hand and pointing toward the barn and the fields as if she was the owner. The sound of her shrill voice carried through the air as she shouted, "This beautiful piece of property is available for auction today. Place your bids now. This ranch will not stay on the market for long." The words hit him like a punch in the chest. He could not believe what he was hearing. His own land, the place he worked for years, the home he built with his own hands, was being treated like merchandise by the very person who had been nothing but trouble for him since the HOA formed. He pulled over quickly, turned off his engine, and stepped out of his truck, his boots hitting the dirt with a heavy thud. His eyes scanned the crowd, confusion and anger mixing inside him. Some people looked at him briefly but then turned back toward Karen, thinking he was just another visitor. But he knew this was no mistake. This was something bigger, something planned. He walked closer, each step heavier than the last, his mind racing with questions. How could this even be possible? How could anyone, let alone Karen, stand on his land and auction it as if it were abandoned? His fists clenched as he thought about how many times she had complained about small things, about his fence, his animals, or the color of his barn. But this was beyond anything. He imagined. He felt his throat dry as he tried to speak but held back. He wanted to see what else she would dare to say. Karen's voice grew louder. She waved her arms to excite the bidders. She pointed at the barn. "Look at the space. Perfect for new development. Perfect for luxury cabins," she declared. His eyes widened. His heart pounded in his chest. How dare she plan to erase his home and replace it with cabins? His blood boiled as he thought of the years of sweat and tears he had poured into this place. The late nights fixing fences, the early mornings feeding animals, all being erased with her greedy words. The crowd clapped and cheered as someone shouted a number. Karen's eyes sparkled with excitement. She raised her hand and confirmed the bid. He felt like he was in a nightmare, standing there watching strangers fight for his land like vultures. He finally found his voice, his tone deep and sharp as he shouted, "What is going on here?" The crowd turned in surprise. Karen paused for just a second but quickly plastered a fake smile on her face. "Sir, this is a private event," she said coldly, trying to dismiss him. But he did not move. He stepped closer, his eyes locked on her. "This is my ranch. What do you think you're doing here?" he demanded. A wave of gasps spread through the crowd. The bidders looked at him and then at Karen, confusion filling their eyes. Karen's smile twitched, her hand tightened around the microphone, but she tried to act unfazed. "This property was abandoned. The HOA has full rights to auction it, and you are trespassing here," she barked. His chest rose and fell heavily as he stared at her in disbelief. Trespassing, on his own land. The insult burned deeper than the act itself. He could hear the murmurs of the crowd, some beginning to doubt her story. But Karen lifted her chin and raised her voice again. "Officers will be here shortly if you do not leave," she declared. His anger flared hotter, the sound of her words echoing in his ears. He looked around at the land, his barn, his fences, his trees, everything he worked for, and then back at the strangers who dared to place bids on it. His voice shook with rage as he shouted, "You have no right to be here. This is my home, and no one is going to take it away." The silence that followed was heavy, everyone stared. The tension hung like a storm waiting to break. His early return had turned into a nightmare. But deep inside he knew this was just the beginning. Because Karen wasn't going to back down, not without a fight, and he wasn't going to let her win. The man stood frozen for a moment, his chest heaving with rage as Karen's words echoed in his head. Abandoned property, trespassing, private event. None of it made sense, none of it was true, and yet here she was shouting like she was in control. The crowd shifted uneasily. Some people looking at him with doubt while others looked at Karen as if waiting for her next command. The air was heavy, filled with whispers, the kind that spread confusion and tension. He clenched his fists tighter, his nails digging into his palms as he forced himself not to explode on the spot. Instead he took another step forward, his boots crunching against the dirt, his voice sharper now, louder, filled with authority. "This is my ranch. You cannot sell it. You cannot stand here and pretend you own it," he declared, his tone carried across the field, and for a second, silence gripped the crowd. Karen's smile faltered. Again, but only briefly. Then she raised the microphone higher, her voice ringing with fake confidence. "Ladies and gentlemen, do not be fooled by this man. This is nothing but an imposter trying to disrupt an official HOA sale. Please ignore him and let us continue. The bid stands at 200,000. Do I hear 250? She shouted. The crowd gasped again. Some bidders hesitated, their hands half raised, unsure of what to believe. His jaw dropped at the boldness of her lies. His land, worth millions in value, being sold for scraps right before his eyes. And to make it worse, she dared to call him an imposter. His blood boiled hotter than fire. He reached into his jacket and pulled out his wallet, flipping it open to show his ID, his voice thundering. "I am the owner. My name is right here. Every inch of this property belongs to me. I can prove it with deeds, with papers, with everything, so stop this madness right now," he shouted. But Karen only sneered, her eyes narrowing as she pointed directly at him. "You see, this man came prepared with false documents. It is exactly as I said. Frauds show up to steal what belongs to the community. Officers will be here any minute to handle this," she said, her voice dripping with venom. The crowd stirred, confusion growing. Some people whispered among themselves, doubt spreading faster than wildfire. One bidder lowered his hand completely, looking around nervously. Another woman clutched her purse and stepped back, realizing something was not right. But a few still remained firm, eyes on Karen, trusting her lies. He felt his chest tighten, his anger pushing against his ribs. But he forced himself to keep calm. He knew if he lost control, she would win. She wanted him to explode, to look like the dangerous man she was painting him to be. Instead he took a deep breath, his voice calmer now but edged with steel. "Karen, you know you're lying. You know this is illegal. You've pushed me before with your ridiculous HOA rules, with your letters and fines. But this is beyond anything. This is theft in broad daylight," he said, his eyes locked on her, his words hitting her like knives. She flinched, just a small twitch in her face, but she quickly covered it up with more lies. "Don't listen to him. He has no power here. The HOA governs this land, and I am authorized to act on its behalf. Now who's ready to go higher? Do I hear 300,000? She barked, ignoring his presence, trying to keep control. His heart pounded as he looked around, the bidders unsure, the crowd restless, the air tense. He realized the longer this dragged on, the more dangerous it would get. Because Karen wasn't just playing a game, she was setting a trap, and now she had called 911. Any minute police would arrive. And if she managed to convince them with her lies before he could show proof, he could lose everything. He could even be arrested on his own land. The thought sent a shiver through him, but it also steeled his resolve. He wasn't about to let her destroy his life, not after all the sacrifices he had made for this ranch. He stepped closer, now standing only a few feet from Karen, his eyes blazing, his voice deep and commanding. "This auction is over. No one here has the right to buy what belongs to me. Leave now before you become part of her crime," he said, his tone carrying a weight that silenced the murmurs for a moment. The crowd looked between him and Karen like they were watching a storm about to break. Karen's face flushed red, her hand trembling slightly as she gripped the microphone tighter. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out immediately. Then finally, with forced rage, she screamed, "Enough! You are trespassing and harassing a legal HOA event. You will regret this when the police arrive," she said, her voice shaking at the edges. He stood tall, unshaken, his eyes cold and unyielding. The suspense hung heavy in the air, every second stretching longer than the last. The man knew this was only the beginning of the battle. But he was ready. He wasn't going to let anyone take his ranch, not Karen, not the HOA, not anyone. And as the faint wail of sirens started to grow louder in the distance, the crowd froze, their eyes darting between the rightful owner and the woman trying to steal everything from him. The real fight was about to begin. The man could feel the heat of anger burning inside him as the sound of sirens grew closer. His jaw tightened. His hands clenched into fists, but he kept his body still. He knew one wrong move could make him look like the villain Karen was trying to paint him as. The crowd was restless, whispers spreading like fire. Some believed him. Others still looked at Karen like she was the authority, and Karen, standing with her microphone clutched tightly, was glaring at him with a mix of hatred and fear, her voice sharp and high as she barked into the mic. "Don't let him scare you. This man is nothing but a liar, an imposter who has no claim here. The police are coming and they will drag him out of this property. He doesn't belong here." Her words cut the air, but her tone wavered, small cracks showing in her act. He stepped closer, his boots pressing into the dirt as his voice boomed back. "I don't belong here. This is my land, my home, every tree, every fence post, every inch of soil was built with my blood and sweat. You are the one trespassing, you are the thief." His words carried across the field, silencing some of the whispers. The crowd's eyes widened, the tension heavy as if the ground itself was holding its breath. Karen's face twisted, red with fury. She shouted again, "Stay back, you have no power here, I warned you." But her voice cracked on the last word. The man didn't stop. He reached into his truck parked nearby and pulled out a folder stuffed with official documents. He held them high for everyone to see. His voice thundered, "Here are the deeds, the proof, the records from the county office. This ranch belongs to me and only me. She has nothing, no legal paper, no right. She is a fraud." The crowd gasped. Murmurs turned into loud voices as people began to question Karen openly. "Is this true?" one man asked loudly. "Why doesn't he look like an imposter? He has proof," another woman said nervously. Karen's face grew pale, her hands shaking as she waved her papers in the air. "Don't be fooled. These are lies, forged documents. I represent the HOA. We have full authority. You cannot believe a stranger over me," she shouted desperately. But her voice lacked the confidence it once had. The man stepped even closer, his towering presence only a few feet from her now, his eyes piercing into hers. His voice dropped lower, steady and dangerous. "You've harassed me for years with your petty rules, your fines, your letters. But this time you crossed a line you cannot come back from. You tried to steal everything I own, and now the truth will come out." The crowd felt the weight of his words, silence falling again except for the distant wail of sirens drawing nearer. Some bidders began backing away, no longer wanting to be part of the chaos. One even muttered, "This is illegal, I don't want trouble." As he turned to leave, Karen's panic was clear now, her eyes darting from the crowd to the man and then back to the road where the police would arrive. Any moment, she screamed, "Stop him, don't listen to him, he's dangerous." But no one moved. Her authority was slipping from her grasp. The man lifted the deed higher, his voice booming one last time before the police arrived. "This auction is over, Karen, your lies end here." The crowd froze as the flashing red and blue lights appeared down the dirt road, engines roaring. The moment stretched painfully long. Karen's face twisted between anger and fear. She knew the officers would be the deciding factor. Either her lies would hold or the truth would finally set him free. The man stood tall, his eyes fixed firmly on her, determined not to let her win. The confrontation had reached its peak, and now with the police minutes away, the battle for his ranch was about to take a turn no one in the crowd could predict. The man's chest rose and fell heavily as the flashing red and blue lights drew closer, the wail of sirens cutting through the tension like a blade. The crowd turned their heads, whispers rising, some looking relieved that police were coming, others looking nervous. Because they realized things were about to get serious, Karen straightened her blazer quickly, wiping sweat from her forehead. She lifted her chin high and raised the microphone again, her voice sharp as she barked, "Officers are on their way. Everyone stay calm. Justice will be served. This trespasser will be dealt with." She pointed her finger at him as if trying to control the narrative before the police even arrived. The man didn't flinch. He stood rooted in place, his documents still in his hand, his voice calm but filled with fire. "This is my home, I have the truth, no lie you tell can erase that," he said firmly. His words echoed louder than her microphone. The crowd shifted, some stepping back to create space. The dirt road filled with dust as two police cars finally pulled up, sirens fading as the engines idled. The flashing lights painting the faces of the people in red and blue, the officers stepped out slowly, their hands resting casually on their belts but their eyes. Scanning the crowd, Karen rushed forward like a desperate actor in a play, her voice trembling but loud enough to carry, "Officers, thank God you're here. This man broke into private property, he's a fraud, he's threatening us, he's trying to steal this ranch from the HOA." She shouted, her voice echoing with fake authority. The man's blood boiled at the lies spilling so easily from her mouth. But he kept his composure, he held his ground, his papers firm in his grip. One officer raised a hand to silence the crowd and stepped closer, his voice steady. "Sir, can I see some identification, and explain what's happening here?" he asked. The man nodded calmly, handing over his ID and the thick folder of property deeds, his voice clear and controlled. "This is my ranch. I returned early from my trip and found this woman auctioning off my property without any right or authority. She is lying to you, everything she is saying is false," he said. The officer glanced at the documents, flipping through them, while another officer turned to Karen. "Do you have paperwork showing HOA rights to sell this property?" he asked. Karen's face twitched as she waved her HOA bylaws, her hands shaking slightly though she tried to cover it. "Yes, officer. The HOA has the authority. These documents give us control over abandoned properties. This man is nothing but a troublemaker. Don't let his act fool you," she insisted, but her voice cracked at the edges. The officer raised an eyebrow as he compared the official deed to her printed bylaws. The crowd murmured again, some bold enough to say, "She's lying. He looks like the real owner," others whispered. "This doesn't look right. Why would an HOA sell someone's ranch?" The tension grew heavier. Karen's face flushed red as she noticed the doubt spreading. Her voice rose higher, desperate. "He's dangerous. He came here to attack me, to threaten all of us," she screamed, trying to sway the officers. The man stepped forward one step, his voice calm but commanding. "I threatened no one. All I did was demand the truth. She staged this entire event to steal what doesn't belong to her," he said, his tone cutting through the noise. The officer holding his documents looked up, his expression serious. "These deeds are legal county documents. They list his name as the rightful owner of this property. Nothing here suggests abandonment," he said firmly. Karen's face went pale, her lips trembling. The crowd erupted into louder whispers. People pointing, shaking their heads, one bidder muttered angrily, "She fooled us. We were about to throw money at her scam." The man watched Karen's confidence crumble, though she still tried to stand tall, her voice weaker now but still defiant. "No, no, he's lying. Those documents can't be trusted. The HOA has authority. You have to believe me," she pleaded. But the officers didn't look convinced. One officer stepped closer to her, his voice sharp now. Unless you can show legal ownership, you cannot auction this land. This looks like fraud," he said. Karen's mouth opened but no words came out. She was caught, her lies collapsing under the weight of the truth. The man's chest swelled with relief but he didn't relax, not yet. Because he knew Karen wasn't the type to give up easily, even cornered she would fight. And as the flashing lights lit her pale face, he realized this was far from over. This was just another round in a war she had started the day she decided his ranch was hers to take. The man stood tall as the police officer's words cut through the crowd. The officer had said it clear. The deeds showed his name, the property was his, and the so-called HOA auction had no legal ground. The bidders who had been excited a moment ago now looked uneasy. Some muttered curses under their breath. Realizing they had been tricked, Karen's face twisted, her eyes darting wildly as if searching for a way out. But instead of backing down, she suddenly raised her voice. Again, desperate and trembling. "You don't understand. He's dangerous. He forged those papers. I called you here because my life is at risk. He has been threatening me for months. If you don't act, he will hurt someone," she shouted, her voice shaking but loud enough to make the crowd gasp. The man's jaw tightened, his chest burning with anger. But he forced himself not to lash out. He knew if he raised his voice too much she would win. She wanted him to look violent. The officer narrowed his eyes, looking between them. "Sir, step back for a moment," he ordered firmly, and the man did, his hands raised slightly, calm and steady. I have nothing to hide, officer. My papers are real. My ID is real. This is my ranch. She is the one lying. She is the one trespassing and committing fraud," he said, his voice carrying truth and calm power. The officer with the papers nodded slightly. "Everything here checks out. The county seal is clear. These documents are legitimate," he said. But Karen wasn't ready to give up. She stepped closer, her face red, spitting venom with her words. "You don't know how tricky he is. He's fooled the county too. He's been scheming to steal this land from the community. Don't you see? He's dangerous," she cried. The crowd groaned, some people shaking their heads. One man shouted, "Stop lying. You've been caught." Another woman said loudly, "You tried to scam us." The murmurs grew louder, the tide turning against Karen. But she grabbed the microphone tighter, her knuckles white. "No, no, you're all blind. You don't understand the danger. He is not who he says he is. I'm protecting this neighborhood. I'm protecting all of you," she screamed, her voice cracking. The police officer finally raised his hand, his voice booming. "That's enough. Calm yourself, unless you can provide valid ownership records. This man is the rightful owner, and you have no authority to hold this auction." The words hit her like a hammer, her lips trembled, her eyes wide. She tried to protest but no sound came out. The man stepped forward slowly, his eyes locked on her, his voice cold and sharp. "For years you've harassed me, fined me, threatened me, and I stayed silent. But today you crossed the line. You stood on my land and tried to sell it to strangers. You dragged me through humiliation in front of a crowd, and you even dared to call the police on me. But now the truth is here for everyone to see. You are nothing but a liar and a thief," he said, his words heavy. The crowd erupted with agreement, some shouting angrily at Karen. The police officer took a step toward her, his voice stern. "If you cannot provide proof, you may be charged with fraud, attempted theft, and disturbing the peace," he warned. Karen's body stiffened, her mouth opened in panic. "No, no, you can't do this. You don't know who I am. I'm the president of this HOA. I make the rules here," she shouted. But the officer's eyes narrowed, his tone even sharper. "Not above the law, not on private property you don't own. The rules end here," he said. The man felt a small surge of relief. But he stayed silent, watching carefully, because Karen's eyes were still burning with hatred. He knew she wasn't finished. She would try something else. She always did. But now the crowd had turned against her. The police were no longer on her side, and her power was slipping through her fingers. Still she stood trembling, her pride stopping her from admitting defeat. The flashing lights lit her pale face, the microphone shaking in her hand, her empire of lies crumbling in front of everyone. The man breathed deep, his chest heavy, but he knew one thing for certain. The battle for his ranch was no longer just between him and Karen. Now the law had entered, and the next move would decide everything. The man stood steady as the officers closed in on Karen, the crowd pressing forward but keeping a safe distance, whispers and angry mutters filling the air. Karen's face was flushed red and pale all at once, her eyes darting left and right like a cornered animal, the microphone in her trembling hands squealing with feedback as she tried to speak. "You don't understand. This is all a mistake. I was only doing what was best for the community. This land has been wasted under his care. I was making it valuable again," she shouted desperately, her words no longer sharp and commanding but weak and shaky. The man's heart pounded in his chest but his voice was calm and cold. "Best for the community or best for your pocket? You were never protecting anyone. You were stealing," he said. The crowd murmured louder, agreeing with him. Some shouted back at Karen. "We trusted you," one man barked. "You lied to all of us," another added. Karen shook her head violently, her hair falling from its tight bun. She looked like she was falling apart, yet her pride wouldn't let her stop. She held up the HOA bylaws again, the papers flapping in the evening breeze. "These rules give me authority. I am the president. I decide what's best," she screamed. But the officer stepped closer and snatched the papers from her hands, his voice deep and firm. "These are nothing but neighborhood guidelines. They do not give you power over private ownership, and certainly not the right to auction property you don't own," he said, holding them up for the crowd to see. Karen gasped as if she'd been struck. Her mouth opened but no words came out. The crowd laughed bitterly, shaking their heads. Some started walking away, others stayed to watch her downfall. The man's eyes never left her, his grip still tight on the folder of deeds, his voice cutting through the chaos. You tried to erase me from my own home, but the truth is stronger than your lies. You've been exposed," he said. Karen's knees seemed to weaken. She stumbled a step back, her voice trembling. No, this isn't fair. You don't know what it's like. He doesn't deserve this land. I was only trying to save the neighborhood." She cried, but no one believed her now. Her authority, her mask of power was gone. The officers exchanged looks. One of them pulled out a notepad, his voice official. "You are now being investigated for attempted fraud, unauthorized sale of private property, and false police report. You will need to come with us for questioning," he said. Karen's eyes widened in panic. She shook her head furiously. "No, you can't do this to me. I'm the president. I run this place. You can't treat me like a criminal," she screamed, her voice cracking. The crowd's murmurs turned into mocking laughter. Some clapped, others shouted things like "justice at last," and about time someone stopped her. Karen spun around in desperation, pointing at the man again. "He set me up, he's framing me. Don't you see, I'm the victim here," she wailed. But her words sounded hollow now. The man stood taller, his voice steady and sharp as steel. "You played the victim every time you pushed your rules, every time you fined me for nothing, every time you tried to control my life. But this time you went too far. You can't call yourself the victim when you were the thief," he said. Karen's face twisted with rage and humiliation, her lips trembling as tears welled in her eyes. But still she refused to admit defeat. She screamed, "This isn't over, you'll regret this, all of you will." But the officer's hand was already on her arm, guiding her firmly away from the microphone. The crowd parted, watching her being led toward the patrol car, her voice still shrieking but growing weaker with each step. The man watched in silence, his heart heavy but strong. He knew this moment was only one victory in a larger war, because someone like Karen wouldn't vanish quietly. But for now the truth had won. For now his ranch was safe, and the sight of her crumbling in front of the very people she tried to deceive was enough to remind him that justice, even delayed, always comes. The man stood silently as Karen was held by the officer, her body tense, her face pale but her eyes still wild with fury. The crowd had turned completely now. No one believed her anymore. People shook their heads, whispering about all the petty fines, all the harassment, all the letters she had sent over the years. One man in the crowd shouted, "She fined me $500 because my grass was an inch too high." Another woman added bitterly, "She tried to ban my kids from riding their bikes on the street." Voices grew louder, each one adding fuel to the fire. The people were no longer afraid of Karen. They were angry. They were exposing her in front of everyone. Karen's lips trembled. She looked around desperately as if searching for one loyal face in the sea of glaring eyes. But there was none. Her empire of control had collapsed. The officer's grip on her arm tightened as she tried to pull away, her voice cracked and desperate. "Don't listen to them. They're ungrateful. I was protecting this community. I was keeping order. Without me this place will fall apart," she shouted. But the crowd laughed bitterly, mocking her. One man yelled, "You weren't protecting us. You were choking us." Another added, "You cared about power, not people." Karen's face twisted. She tried to lift her chin high like she always did, but it only made her look smaller, weaker. The man stepped forward, his eyes locked on her, his voice deep and cutting. "You thought you could humiliate me, strip me of my home, sell my life's work like it was nothing. But now the truth has burned away your lies. Everyone sees you for what you are," he said. His words silenced the crowd for a moment, their eyes moving between him and Karen. Karen's breathing grew heavy, her voice shaky as she screamed, "You'll regret this, all of you. You think you've won. But I still have power. I'm still the president. I'll find a way back." But her voice broke at the end, her threat sounding hollow even to her own ears. The officer pulled her toward the patrol car, his voice firm. "You need to stop resisting. You're making this worse for yourself." But she jerked her arm, her heels digging into the dirt, her eyes blazing with humiliation. The crowd booed her now, their jeers louder than her cries. The man stood still, his document still in his hand, his heart beating steady. He didn't need to shout anymore. The truth had already crushed her. Her downfall was no longer his fight. It was her own pride tearing her apart. Karen twisted once more, her voice shrill. "You're all fools. You'll see. You'll regret turning on me," she wailed. But no one listened. Her words dissolved in the noise of angry voices and flashing lights. The officer opened the back door of the patrol car and guided her inside. Her last glance at the man filled with venom and fear. He met her eyes calmly, his face cold, showing no weakness. The door slammed shut, silencing her once and for all. The crowd erupted, some cheering, some clapping, others just sighing with relief. Their nightmare with her was finally cracking apart. One woman turned to the man, her voice soft but filled with guilt. "I'm sorry, we didn't know she was lying, we thought she had authority." The man gave a small nod, his voice steady. "You don't need to apologize, she fooled everyone. But the truth is out now," he said. Karen sat trapped in the back of the patrol car, her empire of control gone. Her pride shattered, her reputation ruined, and as the red and blue lights reflected on the man's face, he realized this wasn't just her downfall. It was a warning, because people like Karen don't stop easily, even when the world turns against them. But for this moment, standing in front of his ranch, he knew victory was his, and the woman who once controlled everything had finally lost it all. The man stood still as the patrol car door slammed shut and the flashing lights washed over the ranch. The crowd slowly quieted, their voices softening into murmurs as the weight of what had just happened sank in. Karen, the woman who had ruled over them with fear, fines, and endless rules, was now trapped in the back of a police car, her face pale and broken, her threats silenced behind the glass. The man let out a deep breath he hadn't realized he was holding, his chest heavy but his mind clear. He turned his gaze to the land around him, the fences, the barn, the fields stretching far into the horizon, everything he had built, everything he had fought for, still his, still standing. The officer who held his documents stepped forward, his voice calm and professional. "Sir, your paperwork is in order. You are the legal owner of this ranch. We'll be filing a report on this incident. You may want to press charges for fraud and harassment," he said. The man nodded slowly, his voice steady. "I will. She needs to be held accountable for everything she's done, not just to me but to everyone here," he said. His words made the crowd murmur again. Some nodded in agreement. Others looked relieved knowing the nightmare of Karen's rule might finally be ending. The officer gave him a firm nod and walked back toward the patrol car. Karen banged her hand weakly against the window, her mouth moving furiously though no one could hear her words anymore. The man didn't flinch. He had no reason to. Her power was gone. The crowd began to disperse, some people stopping to apologize, others to thank him for standing up when they hadn't. One old man shook his hand firmly and said, "You reminded us what real courage looks like." The man gave a small nod, his eyes scanning the property once more, every detail sharper now that the chaos was fading. He felt a wave of relief but also a deep fire of determination. He knew Karen would try again someday. People like her never accepted defeat. But he also knew he was ready now. No trick, no scam, no false auction would ever take his ranch away. He would protect it with everything he had. As the patrol cars began to drive off, the dust rising behind them, he walked slowly back to his truck, his boots pressing into the dirt. With each step, the evening sun cast long shadows across the land. The same land Karen had tried to steal. The same land he had reclaimed in front of everyone. He stopped for a moment, looking at the horizon, his voice low but firm. "This is my home, and no one will ever take it from me," he said to himself. The ranch stood quiet again, the crowd gone, the flashing lights fading into the distance, and though the battle had left him weary, he felt stronger than ever. He climbed into his truck, the engine rumbling to life, but before he drove off he glanced once more at the gate, remembering the sight of strangers bidding for his life's work, and he promised himself that day would never come again. He would fight, he would stand, he would win, because the ranch was more than land. It was his blood, his history, and his future, and now everyone knew it. The story of Karen's false auction would spread, her downfall would echo, and his victory would remain. As he drove slowly down the dirt road, the last of the sunlight touched the roof of his barn, glowing like a silent sign that his home was safe once more. But deep inside he knew this was not the end of the war with the HOA. It was only the end of one battle, and when the next fight came, he would be ready, stronger than before, unshaken, unbroken.